Hey guys, how are you today? This is video 5. Hope you enjoy it. See you in a few.
Did you guys notice what those deer tracks were feeding on?
Buckthorn
The
berries.
Buckthorn, yeah. They're not eating the berries, but they're eating the little branch ends on that buckthorn. It's an invasive species. In the last few years, I've noticed that they're really just hammer those trees. They love them, especially when they got the green leaves on them.
Early season.
They hold their leaves later in the year
season.
too.
Yeah, they hold them right through rut. They're the last tree to drop. I actually had deer, groups of deer and good bucks going right through like luscious clover plots, right through them and walking over to buckthorn eating the leaves. That stuff's amazing. Not that I like it because it's taking over all of the forest, so you're not getting any kind of new growth because it stops all the oaks and stuff. So it's going to be bad in the long run, but deer sure love it. It's interesting to see them eating it now when it's just dried up and hard.
So when you're breaking down a new piece of property, are you walking transitions first, like what we just kind of did right
Correct.
there? And I didn't see any sign in there as far as anything that would make me stop and want to hunt that.
It would look a whole lot better if there was no snow.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely agree.
You'd see the tracks and stuff from last season when the deer were in here. You'd see the old scrapes. You'd see the trails a lot better. With snow in here, it's harder to see the stuff. And right now we're just looking at like terrain.
Yeah.
But when you're back home doing this, you're probably going to want to wait till the snow melts.
Okay.
And then you got a window between snow melt and green up. And once it gets green, it gets kind of harder to see the stuff.
Did you get into doing any like that e-scouting, whatever, plotting points on Google Earth with the GPS coordinates or anything like that?
Yeah, I look at maps all the time and then figure out where I want to look and find stuff on maps. And a lot of times with these cattail marshes, you can zoom in on areas, and if you go back in Google Earth and you go through historical pictures, you get the right image. You'll be able to see all the trails, the network of trails where the deer use. And these trails, like the one where we cut from that island to here,
Yeah.
and you'll see it when we go to the main island back here. Those trails and those cattails stay there for years and years and years. There's one on the other end of the marsh where 20 years ago, it's over 20 years now, when I moved out here, I wanted a better route to get to this island because you get into the cattails, they're over your head, you can't even see where you're going.
Right.
So I took a machete and I used a big tree as a marker, and I went in like 50 yards, and I took a compass and took a machete and made a path to that island to hunt later in the year, and I did that in July. And that trail is still there in a straight line because the deer keep it open.
Yeah.
But it's still there. So when you're looking at the marsh and you see a straight line, you go, that's where Dan hunted.
I see that quite a bit when we do burn breaks. Minnesota burning, we'll put a burn break in and it'll stay just like that. Everything will be plowed down from the deer and all the animals.
Yep. You got to remember when you go through these cattails, that is like a net. You can't even go through that. You couldn't walk 20 yards in that. You'd run out of breath. You'd be like, what the heck?
Yeah.
So those deer keep using the same trails over and over and over again and keep them open. And you can actually plot your travel with those Google Maps and look at the trails that go through the cattails and plot and go, okay, I don't turn at the first turn, I turn at the second turn, like it's a road. Because those trails will still be there.
Would you ever hunt in the cattails if you couldn't position yourself in a tree?
Yeah, I have, and I have successfully. And one way we do it is to set it up in like July. And what I would do, say you got your bedding island here, right? Yeah. Here's your bedding island. You can't get close to it. It's only like an acre, right? And your buck's coming off like this through here. So I'd come in from a different direction, go up to the trail, have it set up here. I put a piece of plywood on the cattails, a small piece of plywood, and put a chair on it. And I would cut a path like this to the trail. So the deer has to walk past you. If you cut it perpendicular, they will look at you and see you because they look down every opening, right? They're not going to turn around and look completely behind them, so you want it quartering towards them. And then what you do is you taper your cut of cattails up to you, and you sit in a bunch of cattails with them getting higher and higher as they get to you.
Coming up
but you've got to have them cut real low next to the deer because they're sinking.
Their belly's on the ground.
You got to be able to shoot about this high off the ground.
Okay.
So at them, you have to have it really low.
Okay.
But yeah, I've done that successfully. But it takes that pre-setting and then the determination that you're going to go back to that spot and hunt it.
Yeah.
That's also like a one and done sit as well?
For me, yeah. I won't hunt a spot more than 3 times in a year usually. If I do, I start seeing negative effects in future years. And 3 is pretty much for me. I don't think I hunted any spot 3 times last year. There's a couple I hunted twice, but almost every sit I was in a different tree, and I hunted probably on average 5 to 6 days a week. And I think you count on both of my hands the times that I hunted a tree twice, or maybe on one hand.
So you may hunt the same land several days in a row, but you won't hunt the same set.
Yeah, I think I'm burning a spot when I go in there. And a couple of things: either the buck isn't bedding there, so why come back? Or I've got my scent in there, and if one comes in there, he's going to smell I was there.
Yeah. And
they're not real comfortable with you getting close to their bedding. You know, like I said, they'll walk up and down our trails out here, but you get near that bedding, and they don't like that. That's their safe zone. You know, that's where they want to be left alone there. So when you get your scent in there, it's kind of pretty much one and done until your scent dissipates and maybe another buck rotates in. Because that's another thing is a lot of guys think, okay, I found this buck, you know, all these big rubs here, and you know, there's a huge buck here. And either that buck gets shot or they chase that buck out of there. They think it's over. It's not over. Different bucks move in and out of there. When I shot the Rome Legend buck, there's a rub line that goes through the middle of this island. That when that rub line opens up, that buck is coming from that bedding area, even though it's nowhere near that bedding area. And I just know that from history. And I checked that before I killed that buck when I saw it was opened up after I heard rumors about it being seen out here. And went out on the first day I hunted it that year, I killed it. The next week I come out here, and we had multiple tags that year from CWD. The next week I come out here, and that rub line's back opened up again. Yeah, right, that's the kind of look I had. So I went back, got in that tree, and sure enough, a giant 10-pointer I'd never seen before got out of that same bed, but he didn't come in range. Probably because there's a big bloody mess underneath me. But he got out of the exact same bed. You know, and I'll see, you know, you're hunting a buck and you see a buck get out of a bed and move, and you go in there and get closer, and the next time you hunt, another buck gets out of that bed, the exact same bed, it's a different buck. They bed those spots, not like one deer picks them out, they're bedding there for a reason. How the wind goes through there, or how the land's shaped, or there's a reason they bed those spots. And that's how I can go through here and pick those land features that have the bedding on them. By looking at it and go, okay, there's gonna be a bed there, there's gonna be a bed here. That's how I know that, because those bucks are picking them for a reason. So every buck that comes through the area, if he's gonna bed in that area, he's gonna bed that spot. So it's not one buck bedding those spots. There's kind of like a hierarchy too, like a mature buck will get to own an area, and that's why those primary bedding areas usually have the bigger bucks, because they'll take an area like that, and then the closer it gets to rut, they won't let any other bucks bed anywhere around them. Or they'll get satellite bedding where it's way far back, and then that's where you're kicking the smaller deer up. And that's funny too, is sometimes I'll go in and you kick this small buck up in a spot where he shouldn't be, and you're like, there's something big in there. And a lot of times when I kick that satellite buck up off to the side, sure enough, that's usually the days that I see the real big stuff.
So mature bucks will share a bed at times?
They will, but not right next to each other. They'll share bedding areas
But not
when it's nowhere near rut. But during rut, they'll get close. And occasionally you'll see them tolerate certain bucks. I don't know why. So occasionally you see them right next to each other, even rut. But generally during rut, the buck will hold up the best bedding area, the kingpin buck, right? And the smaller bucks will be off to the perimeter. And those are the ones you kick up trying to set up.
Do you think that's maybe by design that the big buck lets that satellite buck there is for a defense mechanism?
I don't think they do it on purpose, but it certainly works that way, don't it? So yeah, you know, I don't know that it's by purpose, but it certainly works to their advantage.
Gotcha.
Okay, well, I stopped in this position because it's a nice spot where you can see out over the cattails. But one thing I want to point out is whether you can see this stuff or not doesn't matter. So if this was like solid tamarack swamp, or even, you know, or big woods for that matter, the same features would do the same thing. So the good thing about cattails is it's a good learning platform at the beginning, because you can look out over the stuff and you can really see things. Like you see these trees on the point coming out here, right? You look out here, and if you look real close, you can notice that that willow tree is out a little further than everything else on the side, right? Off on the point there, you can see how that point tapers down to a point, right? Those are the key features that I'm going to look for here. But if this was solid timber, and this is all flat trees here, and that land was a little higher and had those trees taper down like that, you wouldn't be able to see it from here, but the bedding would be in the same spots. So it wouldn't really matter if it was big woods, it wouldn't really matter if it was farmland or whatever. The bedding is the same type of features. It makes a difference. The biggest difference in bedding, I think, is hilly land to flatter land. But once you get to this flatter land, the elevation has a lot to do with it, the points have a lot to do with it, the way the timber's shaped has a lot to do with it. Most people think that bucks live in the woods, and they don't. They're edge creatures. They live in the thick stuff to the sides. So you look at this big woods here, and everybody's going to be in the middle of it. This is probably like a mile-long island, but this is the only axis to that we're on. Tracks a lot of hunting pressure. There's a lot of guys think they're getting way back because they come back here and then they go disperse in there. And because of the amount of oaks that are in there, you see a lot of big rubs in there all over the place. And every place there's a cluster of big rubs, you'll see tree stands. And what I do basically is I go to the edges where those bucks are bedded, and there's only a couple spots they can bed on that whole island. As a matter of fact, there's only one real good one. And any buck coming on there in daylight pretty much has to go by me before it can get to the 30 other people. So I kind of decide what everybody shoots.
The gatekeeper.
Do you think most of that rubbing then is done after dark?
I do, yeah. Occasionally, I mean, you'll kick deer off of the island, but there'll be fawns or doe groups, or the big bucks are bedded where they're supposed to be, on those points and those fingers that come off of the island. I guess what we're going to do is we'll go in here and we'll just walk this perimeter. There's a bedding area right underneath that big willow, and there's one off to that point. But they're not primary. Then we'll make our way over to a better bedding area that's off the other side, which is the main one for this whole island, where I've had a lot more action on, and I'll show you how we go at that, and then we'll go from there. Any other questions?
So you won't look at the big woods at all then, is what you're saying?
What do you mean?
As far as in the middle of this little island here? Or are you
I won't look at the solid timber, no.
Okay.
It's, even where it's rolling hills and stuff, with the pressure that we have, I won't even look at it. And if you're in an area that has hills and swamp, and you got bucks bedding on hills and swamp, they'll do that if it's low pressure. You add any pressure, and that swamp is going to trump the hills, because the swamp's going to give them a lot more pressure. I mean, a lot more security. So you got to look at what are the dangers to a deer? It's people and it's predators, right? And even if there's not that much for predators anymore, I mean, we still got coyote packs that harass them, but we don't have the wolves and bears and stuff, right? So you look at it still in their nature, where they came from, that's still built into their hereditary, right? So if they get into this these cattails and get on a little hump of dry dirt, I mean, what's going to get near them? And think about yourself. If you're out here and somebody was hunting you, where are they going to hunt you? They're going to be all over that island, right? They're not going to be off of those points. And these points, they lead you right down to the deer, right? So they pretty much know exactly where the danger is going to come from. So they're ready for it. So that's what makes those points so good. It's not like something's coming up out of the water onto the point at them. You know what I'm saying? They know where you're coming from. It's the ideal setup. You'd pick the same thing if you were out here and you're being harassed. You'd set yourself up in a spot where they got to come to you from one way to get to you, right?
What's the advantage of the deer that's bedding like in a bowl?
Bowls usually have wind currents, and they got the high spots that are within water.
If they are bedding in a bowl, where would they typically be? It just depends on.
Oh, that varies.
Yeah.
That varies. You know, I see it all around the bowl,
Right.
and it can have to do with wind currents that you can't really predict based on the shape of the outside of the bowl.
Yeah.
But usually you get that swirling wind in there. And all right. So I want you to notice how I'm skipping all that timber. We're just following that edge. That's all you really need to know when you're looking at a new area. So this is that willow tree that we spotted from over there. I've got a little history with this, not much. But there was one day when I was scouting my way in and I was looking for that big 8-pointer I was hunting 2 years ago. I found some really good rubs coming right out of there through the way we just came from. So I set up for him. I didn't get him, but he was coming right through here. So last group we did, I went in there and checked, and there was a bed underneath the willow tree. So it's still being used, but it's like one little spot. Everything else is water around it. It's kind of one of those spots where you're up on a high spot underneath that tree. If you got into a tree anywhere right here, he'd see you. So you have to be just a little further back, just into the tree line a little. But I don't know how well the bed's going to show up now. We got 10 inches of snow since then, but we can take a look and see if we can see it before we move on. Snowed in. So one bed is right here. One bed is right there. Up against that grass. And you can tell where the beds are even when there's snow, because there won't be no vegetation there. Otherwise everything would have vegetation. Notice how they always got an escape route out the back, or to circle in from downwind.
Have you noticed some bedding on muskrat mounds or anything?
Yeah, occasionally, yeah.
How's your battery doing?
Yeah, I've switched 3. I'm on my 3rd.
I had 20% on the one I'm charging in my pocket.
It'll be off my ground right
There's like
But a lot of people out here pull it back down all the time, and this is all because they're doing that big surveyors pull all the old stuff down. So there's new stuff since last year.
You're primarily relying on your source and knowledge and where people are applying pressure here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going through now. I don't see any obvious signs of people.
Well, to me, almost all the markings go to stuff inland. I mean, I don't hardly ever see anybody hunting next to where the deer bed. They're usually up in the middle of the stuff. So he had a question here. What was the question?
Just because if a buck's bedding there, does he need to shred his bed?
So he's asking about the rubbing sign around the beds, because he's seen some beds that are tore up, right? Yeah. So here's my take on that. The biggest buck I ever shot, I watched him bed in the same bed for 2 years in a row. Even picked up one of his sheds out of that bed, and I killed him in that bed. There wasn't a rub or a scrape within 200 yards of that bed, ever. But I mean, rubs help. I mean, they give you that confidence. They tell you that something's there, and then you're in the know instead of the guess, right? Yeah. But 2-year-olds that can lay down a pretty good rub are a lot more aggressive at rubbing than mature bucks. Mature bucks are more confident. They have less competition with other mature bucks, and they rub a lot less around their bedding areas. So a lot of times those torn up bedding areas turn out to be, 2-year-old, which can be a decent buck, don't get me wrong. But it could also be an aggressive older buck. You got to look at that height. Yeah. But don't expect those rubs everywhere. And one thing, I know some of the people here are from Northwoods, like Tim is. You get into lower densities of deer, right?
Yeah, higher density of wolves.
Yeah, higher density of wolves, lower density of deer. And what you see is when they don't have competition, and there's not a high population of bucks, there's a lot less rubbing at those bedding areas. It's a lot harder to see. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. The rubs, they almost seem a little random just because there's so little of them. It's really hard to pattern them just because the amount of sign they leave is
just isn't there, just because the deer density isn't high. There's no competition.
And that's where it goes back to where I said, I just got to find the rubs. If there's a buck there, I'll relate it back to bedding. It doesn't necessarily mean the bedding area has to be tore up. Tore up helps, because then I know. And another thing is too, you'll see these beds where sooner or later you'll come across them where the bed is hardly noticeable, but you can tell it's a bed, but it doesn't look like it's been used a lot. But man, there's rubs all around it. You know what that is? That's a rut bed. They're there for 1 week. So they're hardly using that bed, but for 1 week, that's a hell of a place to hunt. Usually those are downwind to doe bedding areas, downwind to doe feeding areas, or doe travel areas. And I just really kind of touched on that the last few years by studying some of these bucks, backtracking the ones we were shooting and stuff. We started finding this stuff and putting it together, and I'm really starting to click on that lately. But that's a real indicator. Beds are hardly used, so they're only used for a little short period, but a lot of buck sign because they're working for those does, right?
What about oversized beds? Ones that are like 2-3 times the size of a deer.
Moving around a lot based on the wind and staying in the same bed.
Would this be a wind-based bedding, or would this be any wind?
I believe it would probably be any wind. Matter of fact, if you look at it, it's set up for the wrong wind. They're taking east wind to get the wind from the thick looking out, right? So that deer is basing on you couldn't get to here without him hearing. You know, and this is sloppy. You'd be making slush noises coming through this stuff to get to him, and he'd just be up one of those trails there and gone, right? Now that place, I don't always see sign coming out here. Once or twice a year, I'll see some good sign here, and there's a time period to set up on it. I've seen good action there in rut, you know, and maybe that's part of it too. You got good doe bedding right up here. Come through here, maybe you can come out for that. And this one gets rubbed up pretty good sometimes. Obviously now it's not. There gets to be a good rub line coming out of here. And I can just simply walk through here, and if the rub line's fresh, the rubs are tacky, looks like something's been in here recently, throw a sit at it, see what comes out.
You think doe are gonna do those oversized beds? Or
They do. Sometimes they bed right with a fawn.
Okay.
What we see in the cattails is a lot of times we see these big circles.
Yeah.
They're all matted down. That's usually doe groups.
Okay.
They bed right in a group, in a circle, you know.
Okay.
What about when you take a trail off of a finger to like a lone tree in the cattails, but there's only one tree, like it's just a single bead going past the tree? Is that all a buck would need, or is he looking for two?
Usually there's
one or
going
two
to
more?
be some sort of different escape routes. There's usually going to be a star pattern going to something if they're bedding there.
Okay.
You can see those on aerials too, I've noticed.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure can. All right, let's move on.
Hey guys, did you enjoy that one? I'll get 6 out real quick. Have an awesome day. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you know when the next one's coming out. See you guys later. Bye-bye.